Good morning, everybody. I'm just going to wait a couple of extra seconds for folk to join us here in our Zoom room this morning. I see the participant list clicking up here. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm just going to wait a couple of extra seconds here. Great, I'm going to go ahead and get us started this morning. Good morning again. Thank you for joining. My name is Dr. Liz Whiteman. I am privileged to serve as Executive Director of the California Ocean Science Trust. Ocean Science Trust is a nonprofit organization dedicated to convening science expertise to accelerate progress to a healthy and productive coast and ocean. We were actually created by the California legislature to bridge the gap between cutting-edge science and sound ocean policy and management. I'm so excited to share that today's briefing is presented in close partnership with California Sea Grant and USC Sea Grant. In a few moments, you'll hear more about the newly released report from our partners, a Deep Ocean DDT Plus Research Needs Assessment for the Southern California Bight. But first, today's briefing is offered as part of our Science Services Program for California lawmakers, of which we have so many representatives in attendance here today. This program at Ocean Science Trust was created to bring science, knowledge, solutions, and recommendations directly to the legislature to support your decision-making. And we are so grateful to welcome the legislative sponsor of today's briefing, California Assembly Member Josh Lowenthal, who I believe is available to join me on the screen here this morning. Welcome. And I invite you to kick us off with some opening remarks, Assembly Member.
Hello, everybody, and forgive the misnomer on my screen. Guy Strahl is the Chief of Staff here in the 69th Assembly District. My name is Josh Lowenthal. I have the honor of representing the 69th Assembly District in the California Legislature. That includes the cities of Long Beach, Avalon, Carson, and Signal Hill. And I want to start by thanking the scientists and researchers who contributed to the incredible report released last week, especially those from the California Sea Grant and from the USC Sea Grant programs. I also want to thank my predecessor in the Assembly, Pádraig O'Donnell, and other elected officials who have championed this issue before me. I look forward to continuing their efforts to spread awareness and to allocate funding to address this challenge. The report provides an exciting roadmap to make sure we truly understand the scope of this challenge and how we can best utilize the resources available across the many agencies and partners involved. As we all know, DDT and ocean pollution is a critical issue for California, for all of us. So much of our tourism and businesses rely on a clean and healthy ocean. But as noted in the report, we have to be extremely clear about how we communicate the actual risks of deep ocean DDT. I want to continue supporting public events like this that can accurately share the information as it becomes available, but not just to scientists and legislators, but also to the folks fishing at our beaches, enjoying our coasts, families, residents, tourists, all alike. And in closing, I want to thank the California Ocean Science Trust for hosting this webinar, for bringing together so many partners and agencies throughout this process. And I look forward to working with you all and continuing to be your advocate in Sacramento. Thank you so much, Liz.
Thank you, Assembly Member Lowenthal. We so appreciate your time with us here today and your commitment to collaboration on this issue. I'd now like to move us forward and turn to the work and progress of our partners at Sea Grant to set the stage for today's presentation and Q&A and discussion. So just to set the stage really briefly, as already stressed by the member, deep ocean DDT plus pollution in the Southern California Bight is a critical issue for California's rich ecosystems, and also for our human communities and livelihoods. In recent years, DDT plus pollution has garnered renewed media attention as researchers discovered more and larger than documented dumping and revealed new and concerning aspects of this deep ocean DDT. So those unknowns instigated a call to action by researchers, national and state leadership, and the broader Southern California community. So I just have a couple of things to share about that before I turn it over to my partners here to introduce themselves. Just this last year, we saw national and state leaders bring in critical investments for California's science institutions. In fiscal years 2022 and 23, congressionally directed spending of $5.6 million and $6 million respectively was secured by Senator Feinstein. As requested by the Scripps Institution of Oceanography and its partners, the aim for this dual-year funding is to build on decades of data, as well as the joint Scripps NOAA mission conducted in March of 2021. In a parallel effort, the California State Legislature matched the $5.6 million in last year's budget. Announced just last week, USC and California Sea Grant and the State Water Board are now jointly soliciting applications for awards and will fund up to $5.2 million in projects that improve regulatory outcomes on this issue. So in rapid response to these investments, USC Sea Grant and California Sea Grant programs jointly conducted their community-driven research needs assessment last year. And in a few moments, you'll have the opportunity to hear a presentation from the authors of that report. But most importantly, as already has been flagged, and I want to underscore, it provides a pathway to inform transparent and inclusive decisions about these research investments, and eventually hopes to lead us to management decisions. It's not just a list of what we need to know, but a strategic approach about how to invest to move from understanding to collaborative solutions. And I mentioned that because that goal is at the core of Sea Grant's mission. For over 50 years, the 34 National Sea Grant College programs have supported coastal communities through research, extension, and education. Sea Grant's overarching mission is to enhance the practical use and conservation of coastal and marine resources in order to create a sustainable economy and environment. So I'm so pleased to welcome our partners on today's briefing and the directors behind this collaborative effort here in California. Joining us, we have Dr. Shauna Oh, Director of California Sea Grant, and Dr. Carla Heidelberg, Director of USC Sea Grant. Over to you, Shauna.
Thank you, Liz. Good morning. My name is Shauna Oh, and I'm the Director of California Sea Grant, headquartered in San Diego at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. California Sea Grant's mission is to provide the information, tools, training, and relationships needed to help California conserve and sustainably prosper from our coastal and marine environments. We accomplish this with programming in research, training, and workforce development and outreach, the transfer of science information to end users by extension and communications. For 50 years, we've been collaborating with a range of local, state, regional, national, and international partners to support science-based decision-making in California. In hearing requests from state and federal partners to serve as a neutral convener on deep ocean DDT plus research questions, both California and USC Sea Grant programs were highly motivated to work together to develop a research needs assessment. After over a year of working on this issue, I am thankful to our California Sea Grant team, particularly Leon Bois for co-leading this assessment, USC Sea Grant for our partnership, National Sea Grant Office for financially supporting this work, and all the individuals that provided input for the community-driven Deep Ocean DDT Plus research agenda that you will be hearing about today. We hope that the assessment report will be a useful tool for those investing in Deep Ocean DDT research funding moving forward. Thank you, OST, for convening this briefing and for all of you for joining today.
All right, good morning. From Los Angeles, California, I'm Carla Heidelberg, and I serve as the director of the University of Southern California Sea Grant Program. Our program is unique among the 34 national sea grant programs for its specific focus on the urban ocean. We serve nearly 19 million people from across 6 coastal and inland counties surrounding Los Angeles in efforts to tackle unique urban coastal zone challenges, including the unfortunate reality of DDT pollutants in our coastal waters. We are very thankful to the National Sea Grant Office for rapid response funding, the DDT research community for their trust in us to facilitate this deep ocean DDT research needs assessment, and to the California Sea Grant Program for their collaborative partnership to accelerate this critical work. The assessment report is just the beginning. USC Sea Grant and our state and national partners are committed to continuing to provide leadership that supports DDT research in California. I'll close with a personal thank you to our USC Sea Grant staff for their incredible contributions to the DDT report, particularly our extension specialists, Amalia Amada and Katrina Alvarez, our communication staff, Leah Shore and Charlotte Stevenson, and a USC undergrad intern, Amolia Gestai. With that, I'll turn things back to you, Liz. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shauna, Carla. Up next, we have a first look on the Sea Grants Assessment Report findings and recommendations. So as co-authors of the report and joining us as panelists for today's discussion, I'd like to welcome to the virtual stage, and please turn on your video to join me here, Dr. Leanne Guo, Research Coordinator at California Sea Grant, and Dr. Amalia Almada, Science Research and Policy Specialist at USC Sea Grant. Over to you.
Thank you, Liz, and good morning, everyone. My name is Amalia Aruda Almada from the University of Southern California Sea Grant Program, and I'm joined by Dr. Leanne Guo from the California Sea Grant Program, who has been an incredible co-lead of this assessment effort. This effort has truly been a partnership between our programs, and we're excited to share the outcomes of this collaborative work with you all today. Over the next 15 minutes or so, Leanne and I will provide a quick overview of the history of DDT contamination in Southern California, as well as outline the motivation, approach, and outcomes of the recently released report titled "A Deep Ocean DDT Plus Research Needs Assessment for the Southern California Bight." Next slide, please. So let's start with a reminder of why DDT deserves our attention today. DDT is an insecticide that was widely used in the US from the 1940s until its national ban in 1972. And at its peak, DDT was considered a miracle insecticide because of its positive impact in reducing insect-borne disease and in protecting crops. DDT is particularly attractive as an insecticide because it is very persistent and lethal to many insects. We know now, thanks to the efforts of scientists like Rachel Carson, that the persistence of DDT presents a problem for environmental and human health. DDT accumulates very effectively in the food web, and we now know it leads to lower reproductive success in fish and birds, and is a probable carcinogen for marine mammals and humans. Next slide, please. Although many regions of the US are grappling with the legacy of DDT, Southern California has a particularly complicated history with DDT. The largest DDT producer in the United States was Montrose Chemical Corporation, and it operated in Los Angeles County from the late 1940s to the early 1980s. Various hazardous chemicals related to this production of DDT, as well as DDT itself, entered the environment through several pathways. One major pathway was through wastewater discharge from the DDT plant to local sewers and ultimately out to wastewater outfalls on the Palos Verdes Shelf. During the 1990s, a federal natural resource damage assessment resulted in a settlement to address legacy DDT impacts on the Palos Verdes Shelf environment and designation of 17 square miles of this area as a DDT Superfund site. Efforts to address DDT contamination at the Superfund site and other areas along the stormwater pathway, including the consolidated slip in Los Angeles Harbor, are ongoing to this day. Next slide, please. Thanks to the media attention raised by Rosanna Xia in the LA Times in late 2020, there's been renewed focus on another significant pathway of DDT disposal in offshore sites. Within the Southern California Bight, there are 14 known deep ocean disposal sites outlined in yellow in this map that were used by many corporations in the mid-1900s for chemical waste, garbage, radioactive waste, and more. Based on Montrose's reporting, between the 1940s and 60s, approximately 20 tons per year of DDT acid waste could have been disposed of in at least 2 of these deep ocean sites. Extrapolating, this amount is roughly equivalent to the total volume disposed of on the Palos Verdes shelf. The main 2 known deep ocean DDT disposal sites that are the primary focus of our assessment are often referred to as sites 1 and 2. We're going to highlight several reasons why these sites have renewed concerns from researchers and California communities as to their potential impacts on the local environment. First is the significant depths of these deep ocean sites that are about 10 miles from the Palos Verdes shelf. The relatively flat Site 2 in the San Pedro Basin has been the primary focus of funded research thus far and is up to 900 meters deep, while Site 1 in the Santa Monica Basin contains a variety of depths. As you can imagine, conducting research at such depths poses significant challenges, and the differences in the ocean floor between these 2 sites also means that pattern in DDT transport or degradation also differ. Next slide. Second, significant amounts of DDT waste may have been dumped both via barrels and bulk dumped as uncontainerized sludge, increasing the potential area of contamination. This disposal occurred both at legal deep ocean disposal sites as well as illegally en route to the dump sites. Recent studies have confirmed that some sediments in the San Pedro Basin had DDT concentrations exceeding those found at the Palos Verdes Superfund site. Third, there's now a greater awareness of some 45 DDT breakdown compounds and related byproducts collectively referred to as DDT+. These compounds can have toxic effects, but have not been traditionally monitored in the environment. Improved methods like non-targeted analyses enable researchers to conduct more comprehensive sampling of DDT contamination to understand whether we've previously underestimated DDT's presence in the ecosystem and in local human populations. Finally, recent research has documented high levels of DDT in California marine mammals in the Southern California Bight. However, it's still unclear whether deep ocean DDT enters the ocean food web and if it poses significant risks compared to other sources of DDT. There has also not been research yet done to understand whether the deep ocean disposal sites pose a risk to human health. The Southern California Bight is an incredibly valuable and productive resource that's also home to some 20 million California residents. When you consider the diversity of critical services this region represents, including essential fish habitat, marine conservation areas, aquaculture opportunity areas, ancestral lands, traditional cultural practices, and coastal tourism, it becomes clear why it's incredibly important to understand how deep ocean DDT affects marine ecosystems and human communities. The critical gaps in our knowledge about the extent and impacts of deep ocean DDT pollution in this region have instigated calls from communities and researchers, as well as US congressional and state leadership for considerable research investment. As Liz mentioned in her introduction, there have been 2 appropriations in support of DDT research. In 2022, there was a $5.6 million federal appropriation supported by Dianne Feinstein's office to Scripps Institution of Oceanography and UC Santa Barbara to determine the impact of dumping of DDT across the San Pedro Basin in Southern California. And there are plans for a $6 million federal appropriation as a continuation of this work in 2023, including expansion to investigations in the Santa Monica Basin. The state of California then matched the federal investment for 2022, which was directed to the State Water Board for research supporting DDT cleanup near Southern California. This level of investment and attention to deep ocean DDT really reflects the importance of this issue. But as Leon alluded to earlier, this research can be expensive and very challenging. So the USC Sea Grant and California Sea Grant programs partnered to help articulate a roadmap for future research investment through a deep ocean DDT plus research needs assessment. This assessment process was facilitated by Sea Grant, but really driven by the generous time and expertise given by the DDT technical experts and diverse communities engaged over the past year. Sea Grant's role has been to provide the platform for inclusive conversations around critical research needs of the diverse groups affected or potentially affected by deep ocean DDT plus disposal in California, while also building on the groundwork of existing scientific understanding. We're thankful for the partnership with this growing DDT community and to all of our state and federal partners in this work. Next slide, please. So our community-driven assessment process began in early 2022. We began by drawing information from published scientific reports and research conferences that discuss current deep ocean DDT plus information needs. In July 2022, we convened more than 80 participants representing 40 organizations at a virtual workshop where we really put participants to work in assessing critical research needs. From there, we developed a draft of the report that we shared back for input through community listening sessions, tribal consultations, and review from DDT technical experts. And we are very excited that a final draft of the assessment report representing all of this input was published last week. Next slide, please. The report is generating public interest, and we encourage you to check out the full report through the links shown here and shared in the chat. We also developed an interactive story map website to give a quick overview of the major findings from the assessment and provide additional resources to further explore the history of DDT in Southern California. So let's dive into some of the key findings outlined in the assessment report. Next slide, please. Again, a major goal of this effort was to first outline the universe of management relevant research questions pertinent to the deep ocean DDT plus issue in California. Altogether, the report outlines 76 research needs to support better understanding of the deep ocean DDT disposal sites, as well as potential impacts on human health and well-being, and on environmental and ecological health. Of these 76 research needs, 4 areas were most commonly noted as critical to our technical and community experts. As shown in this slide, these included investing early in site characterization to establish a baseline understanding of what contaminants are present and if they've entered the food web. Moving clockwise in this graphic, there was also a lot of discussion of the need to consider the holistic impact of DDT plus on marine life. There's a need to explore the interactive effects of multiple environmental stressors in the natural environment. Think warming temperatures or even exposure to multiple contaminants like PCBs. Next in this graphic, there was a focus on the need for research on responsive risk mitigation for human populations, with the understanding that not all human exposure will be equal, and that vulnerability will also depend on individual and population factors. And finally, effective risk communication is not an art, but a science, and leveraging this best science as well as co-development with trusted messengers will be critical to communicate the actual risks of deep ocean DDT plus to different users of the area. Next slide, please.
With this vetted list of research needs in hand and feedback on which needs were most critical, our next task was to develop a roadmap for how these research areas could be approached most effectively and efficiently. From participant input, we synthesized an adaptive research model that illustrates how DDT research categories relate and could iteratively build upon one another to effectively increase overall understanding and impact. Research categories are color-coded by one of 3 themes: human health and well-being in green, site characterization in blue, and environmental and ecological health in purple. The model consists of a tiered structure. Research categories in lower tiers provide an informed basis for research scope for higher tiers. For example, determining what research sites, chemical congeners, or species that should be examined. We call this model adaptive because we recognize that research may be happening in tandem across these tiers, but that research approaches and questions may be adjusted or adapted as more information is gleaned at lower levels of the model. Across themes, the scoping tier is foundational and includes a single research category focused on characterizing the extent and distribution of DDT contamination. As Amalia mentioned earlier, this research defines where and what DDT compounds are located in present-day sediments, the water column, and deep ocean food web. We heard that addressing this research category would support and ground all other management-relevant research needs, and thus it is a truly foundational research area in which to invest immediately. As DDT disposal sites are more fully characterized, investments in the pathways and impacts and mechanisms tiers will become more impactful. The second tier, pathways and impacts, includes research categories which determine how DDT enters and impacts the marine ecosystem and coastal human communities. The final mechanisms tier includes research categories which identify the biological mechanisms by which DDT impacts coastal organisms and humans, and whether it's feasible or even potentially harmful to remediate the deep ocean dump sites. In addition to discussing specific research needs, participants throughout our engagement process brought up specific practices and processes they viewed as critical to effective deep ocean DDT research moving forward. We'll highlight just a couple examples of these immediate actions. First, completing a data needs assessment. It is important to build on and not duplicate existing decades of DDT research on nearshore and deep ocean environments. Conducting a data needs assessment would pick up where this report ends by convening technical experts to inventory existing data for research categories in the adaptive model and highlight critical data gaps. Another example is fostering better inclusion and transparency. One of the most repeated requests during the assessment was the need for greater inclusion and transparency around the deep ocean DDT issue. Many participants were concerned that past related discussions and information shared about deep ocean DDT had not been sufficiently inclusive of potentially impacted community members. And so they recommended that future research, management, and risk communication incorporate inclusion and transparency as much as possible. Again, we encourage you to check out the story map and the full report for an even deeper dive into the assessment report findings.
The goal of this assessment process has been to support the growing DDT community and present their vision for future research investment in deep ocean DDT plus issues. We're thrilled that the assessment report has already been a helpful resource in the State Water Board's development of a competitive research call for California deep ocean DDT plus projects. And our Sea Grant programs are excited to continue our role in progressing California DDT plus research by administering this competitive research call and associated community outreach on behalf of the State Water Board. Next slide, please. In closing, despite Southern California's complicated history with DDT, we see this as a moment for a new chapter for action and investment in this issue. We know that this assessment report is just the first step, and Sea Grant is committed to continuing to provide forums that support the advancement of DDT research. We are incredibly thankful to a large number of individuals and communities for making this report possible. Thank you for your generous engagement, support, and trust in us. And thank you all for your attention, and we look forward to your questions and comments. Back to you, Liz.
Thank you both for that really articulate, helpful overview of your critical work in the past months. As we transition into the next stage of our time together here today, into panel discussion and Q&A, I'd like to remind and invite everybody here participating today that if you have questions, to please submit those via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to make sure that we get to as many of those today as we can, and also are happy to follow up later. So now I'd like to transition us into the panel section of our discussion and invite our panelists to join me here on our virtual platform. So if you would, turn your videos on and unmute yourself, ready to share. Let me say thank you for joining and bringing your key perspectives and unique background and expertise to this issue. I'll invite you each to introduce yourselves, and as you do so, I'd love for you to connect yourself to this issue so that we understand what perspective you are bringing to this topic. And if you would just briefly touch on what key findings of the report really resonated with you, or that would be most impactful as you move forward in your work on this topic. So first, I'd like to welcome and invite Dr. Dave Valentine, Professor of Geochemistry and Microbiology from UC Santa Barbara. Dave, please introduce.
Thank you, Liz. My name is Dave Valentine. I hold the title of Norrish Presidential Endowed Chair and Distinguished Professor at UC Santa Barbara, where I also direct the graduate and undergraduate programs in marine science. My academic expertise is at the interface of chemicals, microorganisms, and the ocean. And I've been working on the issue of DDT plus for about a dozen years now, starting with some deep ocean exploration work, which I came across these fields of barrels interspersed with the DDT waste and petrochemical sludge, and a finding that ultimately triggered the series of reports by Rosanna Shaw at the LA Times. I've since continued this research on the characterization of this problem from the combined chemical, microbiological, oceanographic, geologic perspective. And I've also been involved in trying to foster a grassroots and inclusive scientific community that has expertise to take this issue on, including the hosting of the C5 workshop last spring. Touching on the second point that you asked about, the findings of the report, the aspects that I find most impactful in my domain involve the importance of sort of scope and characterization. And I'm talking about really defining the problem at the very basic level. How much DDT is out there? Where is it? How is it behaving in the deep sea? In report terms, these would be questions that are addressed in the sort of scoping and characterization and pathways domains. But really, I'm talking about determining inventories of DDT-related chemicals and what is that full suite of chemicals? What's the geographic distribution of all of these materials in the deep sea floor? What are the non-biological transport and fate pathways? What about native microbial alteration and breakdown of these compounds? And then there's the source ID and disposal history. And I think the report really importantly identifies these topics as being foundational to understanding the environmental and human health ramifications that are what we really are here to talk about. Thank you very much, Liz.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to turn to Gabrielle Crowe, board member and vice chair, the Gabrielino-Shoshone Tribal Council. Welcome.
Miha, and good morning. My name is Gabrielle Crowe. I'm actually joining you this morning from Kumeyaay Lands in Encinitas, California. Like Liz just said, I'm the vice chair as well as the secretary for environmental services for the Gabrielino-Shoshone Tribal Council of Southern California. I've also been an environmental educator for the last 17 years. So it's taking all this important information and disseminating it to the general public has been my job for a long time. But I, as an indigenous person whose ancestral lands that are actually located where the Southern California Bight is, I would say that this is a very important topic for us because, as many of you may be aware, our tribal people have actually been systematically and forcibly removed from these areas and from the coastline. And so now we're having more of a cultural revitalization, and part of that takes place is returning to our cultural practices. And so some of those are gathering things at the shoreline. So this is very important for us to know what more research needs to be done as far as our risk factors being involved in being able to go back to our cultural practices. And so I think that just being a kind of a person that's an in-between to be able to notify our different tribal community members of the risks that are involved in this is part of the most important thing for us and what we can get out of this research needs, but also the fact that still more tribal engagement needs to be done and that we should also be included in the research process, just because traditional ecological knowledge is very important, and it's also something that should be looked to as as important as Western science in that. But I look forward to any questions that anybody might have. So thank you.
Thank you. And so next I'd love to turn to Dr. Pádraig Duignan, Director of Pathology at the Marine Mammal Commission. Welcome.
Good morning. Sorry, not the Marine Mammal Commission. My name is Pádraig Duignan. I'm the Director of Pathology at the Marine Mammal Center, which is in Sausalito. And the Marine Mammal Center is the largest marine mammal hospital in the world. We've been in operation here for over 50 years. And I personally have been involved in the field of marine mammal health research and pathology research for over 30 years. In the late 1990s, we discovered a new form of cancer in California sea lions. And this is a fatal cancer and is very similar to cervical cancer in people. And what we found at our hospital going back over 40 years is that all of the adult animals that are admitted here as patients, up to 24% of them will have cancer if they die and get a full examination post-mortem at our hospital. So that's an incredibly high rate of cancer. It is higher than any rate of cancer in any other species on the planet. An interesting thing about the California sea lion is, even though most people think that they're widely distributed in California, they're everywhere. In fact, the vast majority of the population, the breeding population, is centered on the Southern California Bight and the Channel Islands. So the pregnant females are down there feeding on the DDT contaminated seafood. This toxin gets into the bloodstream, into their blubber, and transmits directly to the developing fetus. And then after the pup is born, the milk is laced with the same DDT plus toxins. So right from the very beginning, California sea lions are loaded with DDT plus toxins. And our research case control study that covered 20 years of studying animals with cancer and animals that did not have cancer, significantly there is an association between the body burden of DDT plus toxins and the occurrence of cancer in these animals. So we are very concerned about this cancer and its ability, this toxin and its ability to cause cancer in marine mammals. The report that came out last week, the DDT Needs Assessment Report, also highlighted that marine mammals are excellent sentinels of ocean health. We thoroughly agree with this. Marine mammals like us are mammals. We have similar physiology, and we eat similar seafood from the California continental shelf. So potentially we are exposed to the same DDT plus toxins that they are in their diet. Now, we also support the proposal to take a more holistic approach to research on the effects of DDT plus type toxins in marine mammals, but also looking at the effects of other potential toxins in the environment, such as harmful algal bloom toxins, which occur in the same region and that also marine mammals are exposed to, and also humans. We also support the proposal to take steps to try and develop more non-invasive techniques and methodologies to study the burdens of toxins in not just marine mammals, but all wildlife. And we further support the proposal that new technologies and approaches should be developed where possible to look at the effects of these toxins on the occurrence of cancer, immunosuppression, and reproductive problems linked to endocrine disruption caused by DDT and related chemicals in not just marine mammals, but other wildlife and humans. So thank you very much for the time to give our perspective on this.
Thank you for joining today. And last but not at all least, I'd love to turn to my colleague, Jenn Eckerle, Deputy Secretary for Oceans and Coastal Policy and Executive Director at the Ocean Protection Council. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Liz. Just in case anyone is not familiar with the Ocean Protection Council, or OPC, we are a cabinet level body within the California Natural Resources Agency that works to protect California's coast and ocean by advancing science-based policy and management, making strategic investments, and catalyzing action through partnerships and collaboration. I want to take a moment to thank the Ocean Science Trust for the invitation to participate today, and to California Sea Grant, USC Sea Grant, and the scientists, community members, and tribal partners that contributed to this report. As we all know, California's coast is home to extraordinary biodiversity, which supports ecosystem health, livelihoods, cultural practice, and overall well-being for residents and visitors. The severe deepwater DDT contamination and its impacts on water quality, habitat, and marine life threatens all of these values and requires coordinated science-based action. And we can't develop solutions if we don't have a clear understanding of the problem. After the deep ocean disposal sites were confirmed in 2021, OPC had early engagement with the Sea Grant programs and scientists regarding the need to identify key research priorities with a focus on understanding the ecological and the human health risks of DDT. As you've heard previously in this presentation today, the 2022 state budget included $5.6 million, matching those federal funds for research to characterize and study the impacts of DDT on marine life and human health in Southern California. OPC has been working very closely with the State Water Resources Control Board, the Los Angeles Regional Water Board, and the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment to direct state investments and identify priority research needs that fill knowledge gaps on ecological and human health risk, better characterize DDT contamination, and will inform management action for cleanup. And you'll see these priorities reflected in the joint call for research proposals between the Water Board and our 2 Sea Grant programs that was released concurrently with the DDT report last week. This report provides a critical roadmap for priority research needs to increase the understanding of DDT impacts and identify solutions to protect marine ecosystems and human health from ongoing harmful effects. This roadmap, which is built on an adaptive and iterative research approach, will facilitate coordinated and leveraged action by state and federal partners, will focus and direct funding to the most important and impactful research needs, and help inform effective management to address DDT contamination. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today to highlight the importance of this science to the state's policy and management decisions.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you all panelists for joining for this discussion here today. At this time, what I'd like to do is to invite my Sea Grant colleagues, Leon and Amalia, to rejoin our group here, and we can turn to the Q&A section of our discussion here today. So as a reminder to all participants, please do post your questions in the Q&A using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we will try and answer as many of those as we can here today. What I'll do is kick us off by just sort of directing a question back to our panelists while participants think of your questions to ask. And I'm wondering if you could, anyone who would like to from our panel, continue to unpack for me and describe in a little bit more depth the importance of continued investment on this deep ocean DDT research, and how what you would describe as sort of the critical first steps to take. I've heard a little bit of that in your opening remarks, but would invite panelists to share a little bit more to get our discussion going.
I'm happy to start if nobody else wants to jump in. Yeah, I think that the report lays out a host of needs that are clearly beyond the scope of a 1 year or 18-month program, and what I see as being critical is everything in that pyramid that we saw in the slides. And the real question is, where do you start? How do you get sink your teeth into this problem to define the extent to which you have a problem? And so to me, the sort of critical first step things are understanding how much is out there, where is it, and what are the mechanisms that it is impacting the biosphere, or at least getting into organisms as the sort of base level of questions. And then how do the deep and the shallow sites, we know that there's material dumped in different locations, how do those interact with each other and contribute collectively toward environmental and human health? And so, I think to unpackage that, we have to start just taking pieces of answering those questions. And that's, I think, what I view as sort of first priority for me.
And invite any other panelists who would like to chime in on this.
I just think that based on the information that's already known is those people that are the stakeholders that are the ones that are actually going out and using food from part of the Southern California Bight that's part of this, that if they're using it as for, for sustaining their own diet, that those are the people that should be notified, because it's not on a need basis that we need another couple of years of research, which also that needs to be done. But yet at the same time, the people that are on the front lines that are using this on a daily basis should be aware.
Gabrielle, if I may pick up a question that has come in from a participant and on this thread. As I understand it, the science is telling us that we're going to be dealing with this issue for a very long time. So what advice would you have on how we maintain interest in the issue and connection for participation in from folk on the ground as our knowledge deepens and a potential solution set maybe becomes clearer?
I just think that communication should just be at the forefront. And I mean, as a person that would actually be able to go out and go, and do some cultural practicing and actually go and collect things. I just feel that I would rather have more information than not, and versus, it should be known in not only in cities that are right on the coast, but people that are, fishing companies that are going and doing that. And I feel like, it's one of those things that it may be a difficult thing that, you're notifying people this, because if they're making money off of the things that they're collecting from the ocean, at the same time, it's just people need to know the risk, whether or not it's something that's going to affect them. And even if it's not something that affects them right now, it's just the risk factor of something that's going to happen in the future. So I think that communication just needs to be there, whether it be at city, county, state level. Because I think that a lot of times, even if I ask people, a lot of people don't even know that this is a big issue. And those are the people that are actually going and fishing, or they're doing this, but they don't even know it's an issue. So I think just communication needs to be one of the most important things.
And so I'm going to pick that up about communication and participation, and connect that back to the research community. And perhaps, I might call on you, Dave or Pádraig, if there are ways in which you see emerging efforts or opportunities on the landscape for the research community to really uphold a new collaborative engaged approach to conducting this research?
I want to first jump in and say, I think, Dave has, exemplified this. I think for the DDT community, he mentioned grassroots inclusive efforts, and he really has done that. And we're thankful to him and his team for really getting us started in this work, providing direction of where we can plug in and build on that. So I'll just throw that in to say I think it is being done and being done well. But there's a lot of interested parties here, right? We're talking about 19 million people in LA County alone, which is the backyard. So just I think, the more hands on deck, the better.
I'll just reiterate that Dave did an amazing job with the first workshop, bringing together such a diverse group of people, scientists, people in communications, media, people in policy. And that was a very productive meeting. And then you all built on that. And to me, it appears now that we have this great community of scientists and other people wanting to solve these issues. And the report provides this excellent scaffold to build research on. And we have already started discussions with, among ourselves at various groups, forming teams of researchers to tackle various aspects of this problem. So the process has started, and hopefully as we get results, we'll be able to communicate those back to the wider community and keep the interest in this serious problem going. So thank you, Dave. You did a great job with that.
Thank you. I would just add one point to this this discussion topic, and that is that communication is really rooted in trust. And one of the things that I've really been trying to do is to build those bridges of trust between scientists and the scientific community and sort of first group of stakeholders in terms of NGOs and sort of officials who are working in this realm, because really we're all pulling in the same direction. And I think that the more communication, open lines of communication that we have, the better we can relay the science as we understand it and the uncertainties that we have with that science to the ultimate end users, who are the 19 million people that live in this area. So, I think part of developing the scientific community is the linkages to the other engaged parties that really have a vested interest, and that will then, I think, help to propagate to the other 19 million people that really matter. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. So we have an attendee submitted question on the theme of communication, and I might draw you into the panel discussion here, Jen. This is somebody who grew up on Catalina and serves on the council, and notes that DDT has always been a conversation for them. And they've shared the effects on human population for residents, for visitors. But is there additional information that we could share with the public about safety precautions or risks to be aware of? And how could we, I suppose I will pile onto the question about how can we and you play a role in communication on this topic moving forward?
Thanks, Liz. I want to just build on what Dr. Valentine was talking about as far as kind of this broad community that's all pulling in the same direction, and that includes the state agencies, not only in being able to understand the scientific findings and the priorities. I think that, as was stated, the scaffolding is really important, right, to identify where those near-term investments should be prioritized, so that we can understand the problem and the best solutions for removal or remediation, which we know are going to be incredibly challenging in the deep ocean. So, that's one piece of our role. And then the other piece is how do we support and help advance communications, right? So the Ocean Protection Council and our other state partners can play a role in communicating, through our website and our listserv, but also doing the on-the-ground work with all of our partners. So leveraging the programs that we have around other issues to get the word out, right? So we've got a network of marine protected area collaboratives. We're part of all of the sanctuary advisory councils. So really looking for those opportunities to share the latest science and the potential risks. And we are happy to play a role in that.
Thanks, Jen. So we've got questions coming in from our participants. Thank you for posing your questions. One, I'll open to any of our panelists who would like to comment on what are the restoration and cleanup efforts? And if the technology is not there for cleanup, then what are the mitigation efforts at the fishery management level?
I can start on the first half of that. I can't really talk too much about the fisheries management aspect of it, but the way that I would address that question is to say that if we don't know how much is there and where it is, I don't see how we can chart a path to cleanup or even really have an intelligent discussion about it. So, to me, this is one of the reasons it's so important to do this baseline characterization to understand what's really going on out there. How bad is this problem? Where is it bad? Before we can really move on to have these discussions that involve nuanced engineering principles, applied to a very deep and expensive environment. But I can't address the second half of that, so I'll pass the buck on that to somebody else.
If any other panelists would like to chime in, just helping our participants, understand the state of play right now, just sort of the deep unknowns on this issue. But meanwhile, Dave, I'll continue to pose a question to you that has come in. Is there a definitive list of the 45 compounds or the definition of DDT plus? And are there currently tests for all of those compounds, components, with particular respect to humans, to get a baseline of current exposure? And so Dave, and then I might pass that over to Pádraig as well for your perspective.
Yeah, I think there's, looking at the participant list, I think we have a couple of people who are better analytical chemists than I am on the line. So they'll message me afterward. But generally speaking, when we talk about DDT and DDX, we're talking about a small number of compounds that is the main component of a technical grade mixture that was sold for industrial purposes. And then a few sort of slight structural variants and obvious breakdown products. When we move on to the larger suite of compounds, we're mainly talking about things that might have been trace byproducts of the manufacturing process that were ignored at the time, but that we're now realizing may be worse in many ways, more toxic than the actual main DDT compounds, and not only that, but more potential for bioaccumulation and less potential for environmental breakdown. So there's no definitive list of what these compounds are. It's really an analytical window that we look at that tells us what the relative concentrations or sometimes the absolute concentrations of these related compounds are that carry structural information that says, I am related to DDT. I have chlorines and I have aromatic compound attached. And so, we can go through and talk about what the main 45 that people look at are. The list could grow in the future. And there's a few on there that are especially worrisome. And I think we'll hear a lot about two compounds in particular that we not so lovingly call TCPM and TCPMOH that have shown to be very high concentration in top predators, and recent work showing that they're potentially more toxic than the other components. So those are the kinds of things that we need to do research on and understand. We understand so little about these compounds. Yet we're now seeing that they may be really bad.
Thank you. That's super helpful. And I'm looking at the clock and realizing that we have very short time left in our discussion today. We will, from Ocean Science Trust, will follow up on questions that we were not able to get to today. Thank you for submitting those. But what I'd love to do is to close with our panel with a very brief lightning round in a couple of words. Based on your understanding of the report and what we've heard here today, in 2 words or 5 words, what would be the message you would want to leave our legislators and decision makers about this issue and moving forward? So quick round, I'll go Dave first.
Important research needed.
Pádraig.
More funding needed, please.
Gabrielle.
Communication lines open.
And Jenn.
We need science to inform policy and management.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And recognizing that we're at the top of the hour, thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you to the panelists for sharing their expertise and perspectives. Another thank you to Assemblymember Lowenthal for joining this morning and sponsoring today's briefing. And I also want to extend our gratitude to USC and California Sea Grant for their partnership on this briefing. As was stressed today, this is a long-term issue that needs long-term solutions. So I know for us at Ocean Science Trust, Sea Grant and partners, as has already been said, today is just the beginning of the conversation. Please get in touch with us if you have additional conversations and would like to follow up. We've placed some information in the chat. We welcome hearing from you. We're here to support you with policy relevant science and solution in service of all of our shared goals for California. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you.
Thanks all.